Well, I shared with you earlier that our vision for the year is the global vision, which is overarching, but we're focusing on things this year, is a world that works for everyone. And that look, there it is, spiritual guidance and personal responsibility. So this is the last Sunday with that, and it's the last Sunday with this wonderful book called The More Beautiful World Our Hearts Know Is Possible. So I'll be pulling from that. And Reverend Lanny's been speaking on it all month. And she early on talked about that story of separation, which is an old story that's fading away from us, thank God. But it's the one where like there needs to be scientific proof. It's like, I'll believe it when I see it. Anyway. And that we're separate, and then the world is a hostile place. And that I have to compete with everyone else to get my share, and there's scarcity, and there's impersonal forces out there that are going to hurt me. I'm cheering you up before I. Okay. And but there's no sacred, and there's no real purpose to life, and all these like ugly things, and that we were on this earth at first, we were. Our lives were nasty, brutal, and short. Somebody said that. I've heard that a zillion times, but I don't know who said it. It was awful. And that we're supposed to have dominion over nature, and we're in control, and we know how to do everything, and all that kind of stuff, and conquest, and you know. So I want to paraphrase Dr. Phil. How's that working for you? Huh? Yeah, well, no, I think it's working for you, but it's working for us. Because it is an us. Because look at, well, anytime you open the internet, a newspaper, the media, anything, the ecology is a huge mess. And guess who's responsible? Whoops, I shouldn't say that. That's political. But we have a hand in it. Let me put it at least that way. And then, and there's a threat to our existence. The global warming, all the storms that have happened, the earthquakes, the storms, the tsunamis, all that stuff. Anyway, so one of the things that Charles Eisenstein talks to us about is getting a new story, getting a new place to live from, and that is the story of inner being. And it's not a surprise for anyone who's here, because that's what we teach. That we're all one, we're all interconnected, that we're inseparable from the universe. There is a web of life that we're in, that web of relationship. Whatever happens to you happens to me at some level. We impact each other, and it's a divine gift, because what we do makes a difference. It makes a difference. I don't know how many of you. It's in the Science of Mind textbook, and I want to just remind you of the microcosm. That's like the little world, and then the macrocosm, which is the whole universe and the big world. And what is true in the microcosm is also true in the big world. Okay, so divine source, God, everything is where we sprang from. So all that is in God is embodied in us as well. So we are divine beings. And so that's the new story. And the rest of the world is not that we're totally in the new story ourselves. We're not, but we're working on it. But we've got the inkling, that sparkle, to know that we're divine beings and that we do matters. What we do matters. It makes a difference in the world. And so we reproduce the cosmos in our individual worlds, so that the love that you spread in concentric circles around you, the hearts you touch, the people you embrace and care for, that's making a difference in the whole world. And magnifying that, if everyone was doing that, can you imagine? We would be truly living in that world, that story of inner being. Everybody would be all together. And we would live in relational situations. We would know that how I treat you is important. And what I bring in service, what I bring in joy, what I bring in sorrow, shared sorrows, all those things are touching each other's hearts. Even if you smile at the clerk in the grocery store, even if you, well, there probably aren't that many anymore, but they used to have people that you paid for your parking at the airport. Can you imagine how many grumpy people they see? So if you smile at them, you know, all these things, it's humanity is meant to be there for each other in a loving way. And that's really the truth of it. But we forget. We wander off. We see something happen, we get scared. Or we see a scarcity, there's not going to be enough, something's going to happen. And stuff does happen. But yet, if we know that we're all in it together, that's one of the strengths of spiritual community. Because when I'm down, you're up. And we can, help each other out. And when you're up, when I'm down, when I'm up and you're down, then we can be there for each other. It's all so important. So, there is sacredness, there is purpose in the universe. But the old separation story doesn't recognize it. But our purpose is just to be here for each other and to experience life to its full. So that's the significance of it. Charles Eisenstein says that humanity is meant to join fully the tribe of all on earth, offering our uniquely human gifts towards the well-being and development of the whole. And that doesn't mean you have to go out and be a goody two-shoes. If you think you're being a good person, that's in the old story. If you're being yourself, bringing yourself full out, that's the new story. That's the new story. So I want to know what stories you tell yourself. Because I know that I walked in with a bunch of stories. And I know that I'm not that different from you guys. So you walked in with a bunch of stories. Maybe from your past, it could be, I can't sing. That's always a classic for some people, not for you guys. But, or I can't draw, or I'm no good at talking to people. Or my family was disadvantaged, so I'm disadvantaged, or I'm disabled, or whatever it is. That's a story. And if you're clinging to that story, most of the time, I won't say always, you're separating yourself from others. That's a story of separation. That I'm special in usually a bad way. Not always in a bad way, but. So do ask what you're asking yourselves. And then changing stories is what we're about right now. It's what the world is about. So we're really, in a lot of ways, going from the separation to the inner being. Now, according to Charles, he said that in the 60s, we were really getting close because we saw a new vision. We saw a different way of being in the world. But the established story of separation was too strong. It wasn't ready to hear, love and joy and happiness and togetherness and stuff. But that was only our first shot at it. We have more shots at it. It's not like it's only one time. So we're building up that. But what happens first in this transition is you have the old story, but it gets disrupted. And guess what happens when it gets disrupted? And all our illusions shatter. So, which is what has to happen. All the 1% things in New York and Wall Street, all this stuff is coming up because We're experiencing a breakdown and a crisis. And that's part of letting go of the old story. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's painful. It doesn't feel good. It's uncomfortable. But what happens when you're comfortable? You're a heck of a lot harder to move. If you're comfortable, it's like, oh, I'm comfortable, I don't want to move. But if you're uncomfortable, you get going. So the ecology is asking us to get moving, walking, not driving or flying, looking at different ways. So the order it's got cracks in it, it's breaking down. But that's because the new story of inner being is coming forth. So it's the possible and the real are much grander than we know. Because we're still clinging to the old stuff. We need to build that trust muscle that we're all one, we're all in this together. And then that's where the miraculous stuff happens. Stuff we would never have dreamt of. Because it happens because we went into the connection. We went into the relationship. We're all in it together. And that's where the shifts. And it's starting to happen. Miracles are happening. Things like, I never would have dreamt that happened. We're starting to wake up. There's more to us than we realize. This community demonstrates it all the time as we come forward for each other. It's amazing. And so this is Einstein's definition of a miracle. I don't think I need this. Don't laugh, I heard that. It's not the intercession of an external divinity in worldly affairs that violates the laws of physics, but something that is impossible from within the old story of the world and possible from the new one. So it's not that it's like, miracles are happening all around us all the time. We just don't know it, we don't see it, we don't recognize it. So he says, to the extent that we stand in our new story, we all have the power to be miracle workers. Well, you guys are already doing miracles, you just don't know it. When you smile at somebody, when you say a prayer, when you connect, all these things that we do. So they're all around us, and we just need to believe in them. It goes back to the, I'll believe it when I see it stuff. Well, it's BS. Because when I believe it, I see it. When I really get it. And I can see it in your faces. There's love in this room. For each other, for all of us, we're surrounded it. So Ernest Holmes tells us this. And this is why, I'd love it when I find books like this that are, perfectly in alignment with our teachings of Ernest Holmes and the science of mind. He tells us, if we do have an active faith, the faith of God, instead of merely a faith in God, our thought must be centered in universal mind. We are convinced that under the divine law, all things are possible. If we only believe and we work in conformity with the principles of that law. So the divine creative process is happening all the time. And because I can't help myself, I have another quote. And this is also from Ernest Holmes. There is a point in the supreme moment of realization where the individual merges with the universe. We are the universe, but not to the loss of his individuality, where a sense of oneness of all life so enters his being, there is no sense of otherness. It is here that the mentality performs seeming miracles, because there is nothing to hinder the whole from coming through. We get our bloated nothingness, out of the way. We can do this only by providing the mental equivalent of life, by dwelling and meditating upon the immensity of life. And the fact that as vast and as immense and limitless as it is, the whole of it is brought to the point of our own consciousness. Oh my God, you guys are so powerful. Oh. And there's miracles all around us. I don't know why, but this came to me and it kept coming back, so I'm going to share it with you. And I know you guys know this woman. How many of you know the story of Helen Keller? Okay. Born June 27th, 1880. Beautiful baby girl, perfectly healthy. 19 months old, gets sick. They're not sure exactly why or what. Emerges from this illness deaf and blind. So she's living in a world of separation, of silence, of darkness. So she's the microcosm of what we're talking about. And that she is a wild child until she's about 7 years old. And then in March of 1887, Annie Sullivan comes to be her teacher. There's movies on this, there's documentaries, there's books, all sorts of things. And Annie is, I can't do it, but she's signing letters in Helen's palm. And Helen doesn't get it until one day they're at the water pump. And so Annie is pumping this thing for all she's worth and sticking Helen's hands in the water and then signing water in her hands. And the miracle happens. And Annie's the miracle worker because the light bulb goes on in Helen. She gets that this is a sign for water. She understands. And then she's voracious because the whole world has opened up for her. Everything is like magical. She runs around, what's this? Tell me what this is. Tell me what this is. Tell me what this is. She's like, she is a child. But it's a whole brand new world because she's come from the separation to the inner being, to see all the relationships. And her family, God, she has a huge personal, she's a joy. Instead of a hellion, which is what she was, she's a joyful child in love with life and embracing it. She's the first deaf and blind graduate. She graduates from Radcliffe. Can you imagine? Deaf and blind. She's just an amazing woman. And she writes books, she types on the Braille machine. She's traveling all over the world. She's a Goodwill ambassador. I remember her because she was alive when I was a little girl. I remember stuff about her. She's a real live miracle person. She wrote, she made such a difference in so many lives because you guys still remember her name. You still know her. And I share her story to show you guys what's possible. What we think, oh, well, because it inspires me, and I'm hoping it's going to inspire you as well, because she lived her life full out. Full out. And it just so happens that she died on June 1st, 1968, 48 years ago, Wednesday. Can you imagine? Such a long, vibrant, huge life. Some of her quotes, okay, now I'm weepy, I can't see. She says this: I long to accomplish a great and noble task, but it is my chief duty to accomplish humble tasks as though they were great and noble. The world is moved along not only by the mighty shoves of its heroes, but also by the aggregate of the tiny pushes of each honest worker. So every smile, every hug, It's incremental. Every loving gesture. And she also says, when we do the best we can, we never know what miracle is wrought in our life and in the life of another. You don't know. You may never know. Except that you trust and you have faith, the faith of God, that it did happen. And I know I'm good on history, so that was the historical one. So I have another woman that's inspired me who's current. How many of you know or have heard of Anita Moorjani? Okay, a few are. She is the author of Dying to Be Me. And she's a young woman who grew up in Hong Kong. And the book is their story. But she had been suffering from cancer all over her body pretty much for 4 years. And in 2006, she was in the hospital with organ failure. And science and all the medical, the doctor, they had done everything that they could think of for her. And nothing had worked. And loving family. And she was in the hospital, and her brother was flying in from India, I think it was, to say goodbye. And she had a near-death experience. So she went over through the veil, and she saw universal truths, i.e., we're all connected, we're all one. And then at some level, she came back. And she's got these stories to tell us. And medical science is going, well, we don't know. Because in like 4 months, she was cancer-free. It's like, we don't know how that worked. So the old paradigm, the old separation that we can come in from the outside and fix you, it's an inside job as well. I mean, the universe provides doctors and all those wonderful people to support you, but you need to do your inner work as well. And she was. So she came back, and she's got quotes that just 2. But so this is what she said. I detach myself from preconceived outcomes and trust that all is well. And this is what I want you to really hear. Being myself allows the wholeness of my unique magnificence to draw me in those directions most beneficial to me and to others. This is really the only thing I have to do. And within that framework, everything that is truly mine comes into my life effortlessly, in the most magical and unexpected ways, demonstrating every day the power and the love of who I truly am. So I'm going to say this one section again. Being myself, which is what I'm calling for us to do, allows the wholeness of my unique magnificence to draw me in those directions most beneficial to me and to others. This is really the only thing I have to do. And she also said, says, because you can get her, she's on the internet, and you can get her all over the place. I knew that was really the only purpose of life, to be ourself, live our truth, and be the love that we are. All the rest of that stuff, no. If you're not being that divine essence of yourself, maybe you need to look at your story. Are you in the separation story? Or are you in the inner being, the connected story? I know this is really bad, but I love these quotes. And this is actually from The More Beautiful World Our Hearts Know Is Possible. The mind of inner being understands that the world in which you have done what is up to you to do, I will have also done what is up to me to do. So when you're doing what you're meant to do, I'm going to be doing the same thing because I'm a mirror of you. And so seeing each other as inner beings When we see each other that way, we embody that more and more. And how do you treat another inner being? How do you treat someone who you know is spirit in human form, just like you? You're coming from a totally different place than if you're thinking, I need to get what he has or she has. Totally different. So everything you do really, really matters. And I love that you came here to be reminded of that. So this is one last quote that Charles Eisenstein gives us. And I know you. You are a magnificent divine being who thirsts to express that divinity in service. You, like me, want to apply your gifts toward the creation of a more beautiful world and the joy of children. So I know you. You are a magnificent divine being who thirsts to express the divinity in service. You, like me, want to apply your gifts towards the creation of a more beautiful world. And now I'm going to solve a mystery. I put cards on your chairs because I changed the affirmation. Gracie puts it in the bulletin, and the one in the bulletin is a perfectly good affirmation, but I like this one better. There should be extras around. Do you guys get any? Here's one. They were on the seats. There you go. There's two more. Everybody else? Okay. I have extras somewhere if you didn't get one. So let's say this 3 times together. I am a magnificent divine being who fully shares my unique gifts with the world. I am a magnificent divine being who fully shares my unique gifts with the world. I am a magnificent divine being who fully shares my unique gifts with the world. And so it is. Thank you. Please stand for the congregational song.